What's up, guys? It is me. I'm back with a funny hat because I couldn't be bothered getting changed and I had to make lots of content all in a row. You saw me last week in a different hat in a different place. Now I'm in a different place with a different hat. Oh, tongue twister. Something like that anyway. This week I'm talking about, well, obviously I haven't got a lot of good content. Otherwise I wouldn't have started by talking about a hat for the last 1 minute or whatever it's been. That's not true. I do have good content. This week it's about audio interfaces. So back to some good quality equipment. Are you thinking about buying an audio interface and do you need some help with that? Here's my 3 top picks and kind of why. Number 1 is the Focusrite Scarlett. Okay, it's they do a 2i2 and a 4i4, which is basically 2 inputs or 4 inputs, depending on how many microphones you're doing. They're awesome. They're everywhere, right? And everyone goes, why are these things everywhere? They're everywhere because they're at a great price point, particularly for beginners who don't necessarily need a big fancy setup. So you're looking at 300 New Zealand dollars for the 2i2, which gives you 2 inputs and kind of all the bells and whistles that you need there. They've got good preamps. All the bells and whistles in the sense that they don't have a lot of bells and whistles, which is kind of the point if you're just getting started. You don't necessarily need all that fancy stuff, which I will talk about a little bit later on and something that I use, but I'm different, right? Like, this is my job, so be careful overspending when you don't necessarily need to. Coming in number 2, and the one I'm actually recording on right now, is the Audient ID14. I've had this bad boy for quite a few years now. It's an awesome piece of kit. It's really well made. The structure is great. The preamps are awesome, particularly if you're using a mic like this, a dynamic mic or the SM7B is another good example where they need a lot of gain, or in other words, they need to be boosted to make them louder so you can actually hear yourself, often with an inline cloud booster. This interface helps avoid that, so I don't need an inline cloud booster. In other words, something that makes it louder. I don't need one of those. In this case, it's a great piece of kit. It's $500 New Zealand, so it's a bit more expensive than the Focusrite. It's made in England. The software is great that comes with it. It's just a recommend. It's a recommend. And last but not least, that's certainly not least, I've had this one fairly recently. It blows the bank right out at $1,200 New Zealand, but holy smokes, it's good. It's the Rode Procaster 2. Now we're talking about bells and whistles. We've got inline processing, we've got sound pads, we've got a bunch of different types of inputs, recording straight onto an SD card. We've got all the awesome stuff coming straight at you from this Procaster 2. You can literally do anything you want. The question is, do you need to spend $1,200? Because it looks fancy, it's got fancy lights in it, and it is fancy. But is it really worth it to you? The answer often is no. Okay, don't spend $1,200 if you don't need to. $300, $500, $700, maybe somewhere in there is actually going to be perfectly fine for what you need it to do. The Procaster 2 is like a mixer and interface all in one. The other two are not necessarily mixers. You can do gain control, all that sort of stuff. But they're more pure interfaces. The Procaster 2's got the touch screen and the fancy stuff and the fancy that and this and that and that and that. But decide if you need all the this and that and that and that. And with that, I'm done rambling on as usual. I'll see you next week in a different hat and the same jacket. And until then, adios.